Hello Cinnamon Bun. Welcome to a Witchy Q&A. So Medician asks, maybe a weird question, but do you struggle with cultural appropriation in your practice? I'm not sure how much this is felt in Europe, but in America I feel like it's hard to enter into modern witchcraft as a white person because many of the teachings, products, etc. are founded on indigenous or other people's practices. So I think this is something that people definitely need to be aware of, for sure. I think the most famous or ubiquitous example is when people call smoke cleansing smudging, which is actually a specifically Native American ceremony, and so if you're not doing that ceremony you can't be smudging, but people do use that word to refer to just cleansing with a smoke bundle, with a bundle of herbs, and using the smoke from that, which is very easy to rectify. All you do is just call it smoke cleansing instead. But yeah, so I think it's something to definitely be aware of. I personally don't find it actually trips me up all that often, because my practice is such that I always put my own twist on anything that I'm using anyway. For me, because again, it's all about psychology and it's all about how it affects my mind, the more personal I can make a spell or a practice, the better, like the more effective it's going to be. And so it's very rare for me to take a spell or a practice just wholesale from a book or a video or whatever the case may be. I am always kind of building my own spells and practices and tools and stuff, inspired by, you know, the things that the information that I consume, but never wholesale. And so I'm always trying to figure out a way to get the benefit of that practice or extract the purpose of that practice or that spell, but using tools and methods which align with me and my path, and if the case may be, even my heritage as well. This is easier as well because my focus is so much on urban and modern witchcraft. When you, obviously, if you're interested in historical forms of magic and spiritual practice, then using inspiration from that is probably going to be a little bit more tricky. Yeah, that's not something that comes up a whole lot in my practice, to be honest. Like, my framework is, roughly, I guess, based on Scottish, British, or kind of European traditions of magic. I don't know if I even answered that question very well, but there we go. One thing, actually, just to finish that off, I remember hearing someone else say, I wish I could remember who it was, or it might have actually been a Tumblr post, so I'm sorry I can't attribute this to whoever said it. But one tip that I remember hearing in terms of cultural appropriation and stuff is whenever you come across a practice or a ritual or a spell or whatever the case, or concept from another system which you really resonate with and you really connect with, and you're thinking of incorporating it somehow into your own practice, it can be helpful to try and identify what it is about that particular idea or concept or practice that really speaks to you, and then figure out a way to access that either through a practice that you've come up with yourself, or see if there's any kind of analogous sort of concept or practice in any cultural frameworks and stuff which aren't closed to you. This is a good one. Do you have any advice on how to practice while going through a low or depressed state? So this is really interesting. I do often find, to be honest, that when I feel really low energy, or just sad or upset, sometimes that equates to me just not feeling very magical. Sometimes there have been times where I still go to my altar in those states. I actually often go to my altar just to journal, and there's something about just being in that magical space, even if it's just to kind of sort through my feelings and do some journaling, which is really good. I think that, first of all, it's okay to take a break. You really don't have to be practicing all the time. But if you do still want to practice, I would really just focus on trying to take the pressure off. If you're saying, oh, I want to be doing, you know, this daily practice, or I want to celebrate all these Sabbats or festivals, and you are, you know, creating like this like spiritual or magical to-do list which you feel like you aren't living up to, that's like a surefire way to just feel like shit. And so I would focus on like, what are some really small, low effort things that you can do which feel nice or feel fun or just feel a bit magical. So I would think about really simple spells like on your tea or coffee or drink or whatever the case may be. Something like choosing an intention for the day, using a piece of jewellery or a piece of clothing like I do with my necklaces is a really simple thing to do. Something else that, again, that Kellyanne Maddox talks about a lot is just going to your altar, if you have one, and just doing nothing and just being there, and considering that your practice for the day. So just making it really accessible for yourself, I think. But also just don't force it if you just aren't in the mood. That's totally fine too. Something that I also find is helpful when I'm low sometimes, or especially if I am like struggling with something in particular, or I'm confused, or I'm trying to make a decision, is leaning on deities or spirits or guides or familiar spirits and things that you may work with, is actually using that connection when you feel just not that great. I have a familiar spirit that I work with that I would like to work with more, probably, like more often. But sometimes if I feel like shit, I just light the candle and invoke him, I guess. And for me, that doesn't mean anything fancy. It doesn't mean like, I invoke thee now. It just means me lighting a candle and being like, hey babe, let's chat because I'm not having a great time right now. Yeah, doing that and getting some advice maybe through divination or cards, but even just talking aloud to any deities or spirits or whatever you might work with as if you would a friend is, yeah, I recommend it. There's a couple of people that asked about scripting. Olivia in particular says, I've just gotten into scripting and I wonder if you've tried it before, and if you have, what your experience was like. I have done a little bit of scripting. I sometimes incorporate it into spells. So I will use scripting to really focus my intention of what I actually want to create with this spell. I am really interested in getting into it more, to be honest. I was thinking about actually just getting a journal for scripting specifically, but I haven't really done that yet. So I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I do like it, and I do find it is really, really helpful for just like figuring out what you're actually trying to do and what you're actually trying to create in your life. Yeah, so Olivia also added on that, what aspects of witchcraft have you found the most successful and fun? I really love working with archetypes, and I guess I work with archetypes from pop culture as if they were spirits. So I work with Calcifer as a spirit, even though he is a fictional character. Yeah, working with archetypes from pop culture is one of the most fun for me. In terms of the most successful, I would say the intersection of that and creating the housework rituals that I spoke about, it really gave me this whole new connection to my space, which I have discovered I really need to feel connected to my space in order to take care of it properly. If I don't like the space that I'm in, if I find that it's disorganized, and I just don't like the aesthetics and stuff, then I find it very difficult to actually take care of it and keep on top of the house stuff. And I also just never want to do housework. And so incorporating magic into housework has been a game changer for me, and probably one of the most successful things. Creating a ritual around that and kind of using invocation and stuff there has been one of the most successful things in terms of like really reducing my overwhelm about housework to practically zero, where it once was very, very high, and also getting me to keep doing it on a regular basis and not dreading it, not resisting it, not absolutely hating every second of it while I do it. Lauren asks, does your writing profession overlap with your witchcraft? Now, on a related note, have you tried scripting? So I've spoken about scripting already, but does my writing profession overlap with my witchcraft? I, to be honest, have not done a lot of craft around my writing yet. But that's really mainly just because writing my own stories hasn't been a top priority for me for quite a while now. And that's something that I really want to get back to. So I do have ideas and stuff for magic around creativity and writing. I mean, other than my Bright Ideas spell, I guess, which is, I was using it for writing, but it could really be used for anything creative, which again will be linked below. I have some ideas for things that I would like to do. I would also like to bring some magic into my office / studio space. I think I'd like to set up a little, like a small magical space in there, maybe like a little shrine or something, to help to just promote creativity and stuff. And I think it does overlap in the sense that a lot of the principles of, like, you know, a psychological kind of model for magic intersect and overlap with and psychology and mindset and the study of how beliefs change your life and your reality. And so that, I think, there's so much overlap there with how the plot embryo works, how story structure works. Yeah. So Pigeon asks, have you ever cast a spell you later regretted? I don't think I have. I do have one instance which kind of stands out where, so this is a thing that you may have heard other witchy and woo-woo people say, which is that you can cast a spell to, like, manifest something in your life, but if it's not in your highest good, then you might get something else instead. And I have a pretty clear case of that, actually, where back before I made my switch to doing, like, this whole natural curly hair thing, I had a really, really old pair of straighteners and I wanted to get new ones. I wanted to get like good ones. I wanted to, like, invest in some more expensive ones that would last a really long time and be really good. And so I did, like, it really wasn't a big deal. It was like a bit of a half-assed, like, manifestation spell for these straighteners I wanted, and I never got them, which made perfect sense because within a couple of weeks, I think, of doing that, I discovered the whole curly hair thing and I decided to throw out my straighteners altogether and never use them again. So in that case, I was like, yeah, I didn't get the straighteners because I was never meant to get the straighteners, because the whole way I did my hair was about to change drastically, and I haven't touched a pair of straighteners since. And I don't regret doing it, it's just kind of funny to me that I did. I don't know. Patrick asks, what is the success rate of spells? What is the success rate of smoothies, my dear? There's no, like, percentage that I can give you, especially the way that I think of magic and the psychological model and stuff. It's all about shifts in mindset and your kind of mental landscape. So there are spells that stand out to me which, you know, felt like particularly powerful or particularly effective, but I can't give you a success rate, my man. Gabrine asks, is there a polite way to request magical assistance? I am not sure from who are you seeking this magical assistance. If you are looking for a witch, like a professional witch, to help you with a spell or help you with something magical, then the polite way to do that would be to go to their website and ask politely. Or you might mean, like, requesting magical assistance as in petitioning a spirit or a deity. It's just the same as being polite in any request, except magical. Like, when it comes to spirits and deities and stuff, I just think of it, I just, like, speak as if I was speaking to a person. And, like, I'm never gonna say, like, I invoke you now and I command you to do whatever. I'm always like, hey babe, if you want to come hang out, or if you want to just, like, lend me a bit of support with this thing, then you feel free. pal. I think I've touched on this a little bit already, but a bunch of people just asked for advice about getting started. YouTube has tons of resources. Definitely check out the ones in the description of this video, but also there's a bunch of videos out there for like advice for beginner witches and things like that. But to be honest, I would say I think a lot of people who are just starting to get interested in witchcraft or spirituality or woo-woo stuff still think that it is going to be like an organized religion where there are these definite rules that things you should always do and things you should never do, and that's just not the case. It's more a case of just seeing at what people are doing and using that as your inspiration, trying things, seeing what works for you, seeing what resonates with you, seeing what kinds of things you find that you believe or that you don't believe, and just going from there. It's really DIY, it's DIY spirituality. So trust yourself, experiment, have fun with it, and just take what works for you and leave what doesn't. Oh yeah, this is a fun one. So this was in terms of, again, how often do I practice? Dragon Eats and Writes asks, do you celebrate any witchy holidays? Obviously, different religions and spiritual paths have different holidays and festivities associated with them. One of the most frequent ones you'll see is the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, so framework of 8 Sabbats, 8 festivals that are based on the seasons. Yeah, so back in the day I was really into that. I was really interested in the Wheel of the Year, but I always found it difficult to connect in any deeper way with the Wiccan Sabbats, because to me they just seemed so entrenched in these, like, they were like old harvest festivals, and everything about them was, it was all about farming and reaping and sowing and winter and you know, like storing up food for it and stuff, and it's just all about this life that most of us just don't lead anymore. The seasonal changes don't affect us in the same way that they did. I don't strictly celebrate any festivals really. I kind of thought about what I care about in terms of times of year which have meaning for me and what they actually mean to me as a modern witch, as a person who is living in 2020. And so I do have kind of spiritual practices and an interest in particular holidays and stuff throughout the year, but it's really DIY for me. I take what interests me and I leave the rest. So for me, that means I don't celebrate like the 8 Sabbats on those particular dates. I kind of actually break my year into just 4, into the seasons, and I think about how I would how I want to connect with the season that I'm in. Yes, I guess I have to some extent created my own Wheel of the Year, which, to be honest, I don't refer to it a lot. I've actually lost, like I wrote up or drew up a kind of layout of, you know, the events on the calendar year that or the times of the year that I am interested in magically and spiritually. And I've actually lost that sheet of paper now, and I was looking for it a while back and I can't find it. I haven't seen it since I moved, which means that I've not really been able to go to that to actually, you know, practice this stuff or to commemorate or to observe any of these times or festivals. So I probably want to do something like that again, or maybe start from scratch. But yeah, I've got my own relationship with the different festivals. I do really love Samhain and Halloween. To me, my celebration of that is a combination of the two. And similar with Christmas and Yule. Like for me, that is like, it's a celebration of the winter season. And I take the practices and the traditions and stuff from both Christmas and Yule, like the ones that resonate with me, and I celebrate that over, you know, the entire, maybe like the 2-week period around Yule and Christmas. So I don't really observe things with really strict times. Again, I've mentioned Kellyanne a million times in this video, but she has a really great video on kind of making the Wheel of the Year your own, and figuring out what really matters to you in terms of things that you might like to observe or celebrate. So I guess I will put that in the description below. That was a big inspiration for me in terms of rethinking the Wheel of the Year and how I might like to celebrate the passage of time itself. So Nava asks, what are your views on curses and baneful magic in general? I know it's a controversial topic, so feel free to skip this one if you don't want to open that can of worms. To be honest, for the most part, the way that I view magic, again, through this kind of psychological model, if someone doesn't know that you've done a spell, and they don't believe that it would work, then I don't really see it as having any kind of effect. So for the most part, I don't really feel the urge ever to do baneful magic or curses or anything like that, because again, magic for me is all about what it does to me, and how it changes me and my perspective. Yeah, so it's just not something that really comes into my practice all that much, to be honest. I don't do magic for or on other people, basically ever, whether it's good or bad. So it just doesn't really come up that much for me. Like from a psychological standpoint, say you're going to do like a curse or a hex. Say you're doing a spell with the intent of making something a bit shitty for someone else or harming someone else in some way. The way I see it, you're doing that spell, and so the psychological effect on you of doing that spell is that you are spending a lot of time focusing on hurting someone else. Whether or not that's something that you want to do or that you think is a good idea is obviously up to you. I personally don't really see the point in that, because at the end of the day, I'm like, well, if I was to do that spell, it's just me spending a lot of time and energy thinking about hurting someone else, when maybe that time and energy is better spent focusing on protecting myself, removing myself from a situation where they could harm me or bother me, or maybe I would focus on a spell of letting go of the pain that they might have caused me. I guess I just don't think of it as particularly productive. That doesn't mean that I think that nobody should ever do that kind of magic. Again, it's super personal, whatever works for you. So Carl asked a bunch of questions, kind of just about witchcraft in general, but I think I've kind of covered basically all of that when I was talking about how I got started and my actual beliefs about the model of why magic works, and also misconceptions and stuff around it. So I think I've covered all of that. I'm not going to go over it again here. Pico Mango asks, is there any part of your practice that you do or would consider doing with others? Why or why not? So I have basically always been a solitary practitioner, partly because that's what I like to do, and also because it's just difficult to find people in real life, or it was in the past, who are also practicing. I really love talking about witchcraft and magic and spirituality, and so I enjoy a kind of community aspect in that sense, but I don't really feel the need to practice all that much with other people. I would maybe go to celebrations and stuff. I can see that being fun with other people, but for the most part, again, like, to me, everything is more powerful the more personal you can make it. So the idea of doing rituals and stuff as a group is probably going to water that down in some sense. Although I'm sure there are other benefits to it that you can't get practicing solo. But yeah, it's not something that's really high on my priority list at the moment. So some altar questions. Similar questions from Skip D and Molly here. How do you choose what to keep on your altar space, and what kind of supplies do you keep and where do you get them? And Molly asks, how do you design your altar and where do you buy your witchy stuff? So if you haven't seen my moving house video, I show basically all of my witchy supplies in that, because I was organising them and putting them onto my altar. So if you're interested in the stuff that I have, go check that out. In terms of what I keep there, that's all of it really. Candles, vessels, trays, bottles. I have crystals, divination stuff, so cards of decks of cards. And the other stuff is really just like spell ingredients. So things like salt, coffee beans, any trinkets and stuff which have meaning to me, which I can use as talismans and stuff. Essential oils, matches, cauldron. Yeah, that's kind of about it. In terms of how I design my altar, to be honest, mine is very minimalist. Anything that is on my altar either needs to have a purpose, and it either needs to have like a physical purpose, or a magical or spiritual purpose. So either it's something that I physically use, like matches, I need matches to light candles, or I have a bowl to use for ashes and to put burnt matches in and stuff, so it's like a kind of mundane purpose, or it's there for a magical purpose. So it might just be to remind me of a particular idea. It might be I have a candle there for invoking my familiar spirit, and there are some trinkets around there which are all related to that. Or it's my cauldron, which I use for releasing stuff or just burning stuff in. Or it's a candle to activate, a magical space, or to activate a particular spell or intention, or whatever the case may be. So the key for me really is just that anything that's on there needs to have a purpose. Everything underneath, like the surface of my altar, is just really storing all my magical bits and bobs. Yeah, so that it's ready to go for whenever I need it. But the top surface I try to keep really clear, because I like to journal and stuff and actually do workings in that there. And obviously I need space to do that. Okay, this is going to be the last question. I think this is it. My throat is getting sore. That's a lot of talking I've done today. Cheryl asks, have you considered implementing an altar into your bullet journal? I really love magic and bullet journaling together. It's great. I really like the idea of altars that you create in notebooks or sketchbooks and stuff, like on paper. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it's probably one of those things that's like a bit more useful for people who are in the broom closet, or don't really have a lot of space, or don't really have the ability to have like a real altar space. Since I have a working altar and I have a lot of magical spaces around my flat, I don't really feel the need to do something like that in my bullet journal. But I think it's a really cool concept. I don't know, maybe I would maybe set up like a mini altar in my bullet journal for anything that I want to do like on the go. So I would maybe set up a shrine, a hand-drawn kind of version of a shrine or somewhere to invoke my familiar spirit or something. Okay, last check. I think that might be everything. Oh my god, I can't believe we answered all these questions. Sorry, I forgot to answer the other part of that, which was, where do you buy your witchy stuff? Just shops. To be honest, a lot of my witchy supplies are just from H&M Home. That's where I get a lot of my candle holders and trays and boxes to store my crystals and stuff like that. I am a sucker for Urban Outfitters. I don't like them as a company, but they do hit my sweet spot in terms of a lot of like hipster aesthetic kind of witchy stuff. And just like your local witchy shop, there are a couple of occult shops in Glasgow, and I just go to them for mainly incense is the main thing that I get from there, and I'll maybe have a look at the crystals. But to be honest, I like crystals, but they don't play a huge role in my practice, to be honest. They're kind of just like another spell ingredient that I have. Yeah, but also just like Flying Tiger, actually. Flying Tiger Copenhagen is really good for candles. That's where I get my candles. But also just good for knickknacks. That's about it, really. I get my essential oils from Holland & Barrett, which is a health food shop. I have gotten all of my tarot and Lenormand decks from Labyrinthos, which is an online thing. Okay, that is every question answered. Oh my god. I hope you enjoyed this little look into my witch life, and I'll talk to you soon, Cinnamon Bun. Bye.